The Witch of Black Hollow. In the remote forests of New England, far from the comfort of paved roads and towns, there lies a place that no local dares to speak of, known only to a few as the Black Hollow. It's a stretch of dense woodland where even animals seem to avoid venturing. Over the years, rumors have circulated about strange happenings, children disappearing without a trace, eerie lights flickering between the trees, and unsettling sounds that echo in the dead of night. Though dismissed by most as folklore, historical records tell a different story, one that many have tried to bet. The origins of this dark legend date back to the 1600s, during the height of the infamous witch trials. A woman by the name of Agnes Colburn lived deep in the woods on the outskirts of a small New England Puritan village. She was an outsider, a healer, and to many, a woman of unholy knowledge. The villagers grew wary of her strange ways, her solitary life, her herbal potions, and the odd symbols she carved into the trees. When children from the village began disappearing, the whispers about Agnes grew louder. According to surviving documents, one particularly harsh winter, 3 children vanished within a week. Each had been seen playing or working in the woods, but never returned when the sun began to set. Desperate, the villagers formed search parties, combing the forest in vain. Then, one night, a hunter claimed to have seen Agnes near the edge of the village, dragging something small and limp behind her into the darkness. Could have been a small deer she was preparing, a bag of her healing supplies, or it could have been a child. The next morning, she was accused of witchcraft by the local leaders and religious men of the village. The trial was swift and brutal. Hearsay reigned supreme, and stories were embellished with each telling. Witnesses denied the charges, and in the mind of the people who refused to return the missing children, the villagers, convinced of her guilt, took matters into their own hands. They dragged her to the hollow and hanged her from an ancient tree at its heart. Before she died, legend says she cursed the village, vowing to return and become what they feared her to be. That very night, the remaining children of the village vanished. The search continued for days, but no trace of them was ever found. Families who had once been united in fear and fury now wept in shared horror. The village grew quiet, haunted by the loss of its youngest and most innocent. Over time, life resumed, as it always does, but the dark shadow over Black Hollow remained. As the generations passed along and modern life crept into the village, the story of Agnes Colburn faded into obscurity, told only in hushed tones as a warning to keep children away from the woods. Yet, every few decades, a child would disappear near Black Hollow, always without a trace. Some locals believed the curse was real, that Agnes was exacting her revenge, and that the children she took were somehow connected to the families that had condemned her. Others believed the stories were nothing more than superstition, and more mundane monsters were truly to blame. In the 1940s, the Hollow's terrible reputation was reignited when 2 siblings, Thomas and Abigail, vanished while playing near the forest's edge. The town, now a small forgotten settlement, conducted an extensive search. The children's mother, Anna, was beside herself with grief. Neighbors claimed she wandered into the woods every night, calling for her children, but always returned empty-handed, her face gaunt and hollow, like someone wasting away. 3 days later, George Marrow, A farmer living on the edge of the hollow reported hearing soft laughter from the woods late at night. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but as the nights passed, the sounds grew more persistent. He decided to investigate, and what he found chilled him to the bone. Small footprints, the size of a child's, were imprinted in the mud near the tree line, leading deeper into the forest. Barrow told the local authorities, but his warnings went mostly unheeded. A week after the disappearance, Anna was found dead, hanging from the same ancient tree where Agnes Colburn had been executed. Her face was twisted in terror, her eyes wide and staring at the forest. There were no signs of her children, but her home was found in disarray, as if she had been frantically searching for something in her final hours. What terrified investigators most were the symbols, unknown to them at the time, but identical to those Agnes had carved centuries before, scratched into the walls of the children's room. The discovery of Anna's body was the final straw for many. Families began leaving the area, afraid that the curse was real. The few who stayed rarely spoke of the hollow, and parents kept their children close, forbidding them from playing anywhere near the woods. But despite their caution, the disappearances continued, sporadically but consistently. A child would vanish, and though searches were conducted, no bodies were ever found. The woods always seemed too still, too quiet, like something unnatural lingered in the air. It wasn't until the 1980s that Black Hollow's terrible history attracted new attention. Margaret Weaver, a local historian with an obsession for uncovering long-forgotten truths behind urban legends, became fixated on the legend of Agnes Colburn. She spent years piecing together the fragmented history of the witch trials, combing through ancient trial records, personal letters, and town archives, trying to make sense of the strange events surrounding the Colburn case and the subsequent disappearances. Weaver's final report, published in a small regional journal, detailed a chilling pattern. Every time a child went missing, the surrounding woods would grow unnaturally still, and a strange, sickly sweet smell, like rotting fruit, would linger in the air. She also noted that many of the families whose children disappeared were direct descendants of the original villagers who had condemned Agnes. But Weaver's obsession with the hollow would cost her more than just her time. One autumn evening in 1986, she vanished. Her car was found abandoned at the edge of Black Hollow, keys still in the ignition, and her notes scattered on the ground. The only clue was a single footprint in the mud, much too small to be hers, leading into the hollow. Weaver's disappearance made national headlines for a short time, but like so many before her, she was never found. In the years that followed, the small town near Black Hollow all but disappeared. Most of the remaining residents moved away, unwilling to tempt whatever ancient evil still lurked in the woods. But a few families, stubborn or simply too poor to leave, remained behind. They lived in fear, always watching the woods, always listening for the sounds of children's laughter on the wind. They spoke of a woman, pale and thin, her eyes gleaming with something otherworldly, standing among the trees at dusk. She was always watching, always waiting. The authorities, of course, denied these reports. But those who have lived near the hollow their entire lives know the truth. The witch of Black Hollow still walks the woods, her hunger never sated, and her curse still claiming the descendants of those who wronged her. Some believe that the disappearances will never stop, that Agnes's thirst for vengeance will never be quenched. Others hope that if the right rituals are performed, the right apologies made, she might finally find peace. But as the years go by and the woods remain still and dark, those hopes fade. And if you listen carefully on certain nights, you can hear her calling for her children, forever lost in the darkness of the hollow. But the true horror of Black Hollow is not just the disappearances. It's the realization that the curse is not just some ancient legend. It's still very much alive, growing stronger with each passing generation, feeding on the fear and grief of those it touches. And for those unlucky enough to live within its shadow, there is no escape. So if you ever find yourself in the forests of New England, far from the comfort of paved roads and towns, remember this: stay far away from Black Hollow. The witch is still out there, and she's always watching, always waiting for the next child to wander too close to the woods. And once they are gone, they're never coming back. The darkness of the hollow is eternal, and its hunger never ends.